everyone. Welcome to Western Piedmont Community College's summer demonstration series. And today is our last demonstration. I can't believe it's been, 6 weeks? And so summer goes by pretty fast. We're still registering students this week until July 30th. And then we also have our last chance registration on August the 12th. Classes begin August 17th. Okay, so if you're interested, please send me an email. So I have requests for doing more hand building, and at the last demonstration we ended with talking about hump molds, making molds and using slabs to create platters. So today I'm going to introduce you to Sandy Parentosi's Circle-matic. So the Circle-matic is a wonderful packet of templates that are all based on cones, and they're interchangeable. You can stack them, you can use them alone by themselves. So if you are a hand builder, or if you're a teacher, I think it's a really great first step to introducing that to your students, or starting to think about that kind of way of working. So today, dropped a couple of these. Today we're going to make a bowl and we're going to make a cup using a slab. And with the Circle-matic, there are several cone shapes and truncated forms. And so this is just a cone with the top cut off. And we're going to make a bowl with the pattern I and the circle that's 3.5 inches. And then we're going to make a cup with the pattern P with the 3-inch circle. And then we're just going to do a simple handle on the cup. Okay, so I have a couple of these forms here so you can see where we're going in this demonstration. So these were all made from a slab. Okay, so I have my slab. I went ahead and rolled it out, and I am going to go ahead and smooth it just because I want to get rid of the canvas texture. This board that I'm working on does have canvas on it. If you are a teacher, you can just have some boards cut and wrap canvas over them, and it's a really great surface for your students that's not going to let the clay stick. And so the side that I'm smoothing really well, I'm probably going to make that the outside of my bowl, even though I'm going to go back and do some more smoothing once my bowl is put together. You can press stamps into your slab and put your bowl together, and and then you'll have the stamping on the outside. Okay, so because it's really, really hot here in the south and it's very humid, I had to put a fan on my slab in order to get it to a state where it would stand on its own. So it's a good idea to roll your slabs ahead of time, and then maybe in your studio roll slabs in the morning and then come back in the afternoon, flip them over halfway midday, and then they should be perfect for working, or just wrap them up until the next day. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do is start with it doesn't really matter, start with my bowl. And what I tell all my students is don't put it in the middle of your slab. Start over on the side, because then you have all this area to still use. And I like to trace first with my needle tool. Oh, there you are. Trace with the needle tool, because you don't want to cut up against this paper. If you do, you're probably going to cut into the paper with your knife, and then over time they won't last. And you don't want to have to purchase this kit over and over again. Now, we got our Circle-matic from Bailey Supply in New York. That's where we ordered it. I'm not sure if here in North Carolina High Water Clay carries it. I'm sure they could get it for you, but that's just where we got ours. Okay, so after you trace your pattern, then you're going to cut it out. And you want to make sure when you're cutting your pattern, you keep your knife straight. You don't want to lean it, okay? We don't want to give it a bevel yet. So I'm just gonna move as I'm cutting. I think it's a good idea to stand when you're making hand-built pots. Sitting doesn't allow you to really move around the clay. Okay, so I'm just gonna be cutting out my patterns right now. It's a lot like sewing, you know, you wanna have everything cut out and then you'll put your pottery together. Okay, so go ahead and get my P shape, which is my cup. And I'm gonna trace first. What's nice about these patterns, and I'll actually show you, I'll go ahead and cut out another bowl shape, is you can stack them and get tall forms. Okay, so I'm just cutting out my patterns. And I'll set this one aside. I'm gonna go ahead and cut out one more bowl. Just because I have all of this pattern I can still use. Or all this slab, sorry, I can still use. I think it's nice having hand-built elements in your line of work because it gets you off the wheel and helps you think about form in another way. If you sit and throw for hours and hours at a time, your back may start hurting, you might hurt your wrist. So it's good to get up and move around and try something different. Okay, now I need to cut out the bottoms. So my 3" will go to my cup and my 3.5" will go to my, my bowl. Now, something that I want to point out is when I make my bottoms, I don't make them thick, okay? I roll my clay a little bit thinner. So my slabs right now are at 1/4 inch. So I'm just gonna roll this thinner using a pony roller. If you don't, your piece gets really bottom heavy and you have an incredibly like thick, chunky foot, and it's just not that attractive. I don't think so. So what I'm gonna do is bring my banding wheel over, and when you're cutting a circle, you need to put it on a banding wheel, and that way you can just hold your hand in one place and move the wheel, and that way you get a perfect circle. If you try to rotate your wrist around the circle and cut, it's going to not come out a circle. It'll come out kind of a chewed up kind of square sometimes. So just think about that. If you can get your banding wheel out, get it out. Okay, and then I need for my bottom thinner. Okay. So for these, I have a couple of different tools that I use, whichever knife you like. I don't really like using a fettle knife because I feel like a fettle knife doesn't really cut as much as it moves clay, and so you don't get as crisp of a line. Okay, so let me go ahead and clean my space. I'm really big about that. I don't like having anything in the space that I don't need. Okay, so my patterns, I don't need those anymore. Especially if you have a small studio space, you need to make sure that you keep your area clutter-free. Okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and start with the bowl. piece of paper towel or plastic, but either one works. I like to just compress this edge right here, and it helps prevent cracking. It makes it nice and neat, and if you want to eat out of the bowl or sip out of it, it won't have any sharp edges. So I'm just going to go ahead and do a soft compression, just rounding that corner, and then I'm going to flip it over and do the same thing on the other side. I'm just compressing and just rounding that corner there, that edge. Okay, so now the next step is that we need to cut an angle on the side of our bowl. So you need to just hold your tool at a 45 and put your thumb at the end where the clay is going to pull as you're cutting. If you don't put your thumb or finger here as you're cutting that angle, it's gonna pull and drag it, and then it'll get longer on that side, okay? So let me show again. So what I'm doing is I'm holding my tool at an angle and I'm taking off that edge. And I'm gonna hold my thumb here, so as I'm cutting, it's gonna keep the clay from dragging off, okay? So I'm just gonna put my thumb, hold my knife at an angle, cut. Now, something else I did is I cut an angle on the left side, and then I flipped over and cut an angle on the left side, okay? You can't have an angle on the same side, okay? We want to cut on opposite sides, so when you meet those, you have a continuous thickness throughout the form, okay? So both of those should meet. Now, what I want to do is take my serrated rib and scratch that surface, and again, we don't want to just pull the clay in one direction. Go ahead and start from the bottom and score the clay with your serrated rib and meet in the middle. Flip over, score, and score. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of water. And using a nice soft bristled brush keeps the clay from being moved with a sponge. Sometimes a sponge can be a little harsh. So now I'm just gonna pick the form up, okay? And just to work so you guys can see, I normally do this in front of me. I bring it together and I'm just going to tack the top. So I tacked the top, and then I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna move it so you can see, and I'm just gonna tack the bottom. Now, you do have to have counter pressure, so as I'm tacking on the outside with my finger, I have my thumb on the inside, and you should have a nice continuous thickness of wall, okay? So now, the same thing, we don't wanna just smooth the clay in one direction, okay, or it's gonna pull it. So we wanna have our finger on the inside, and I'm just kind of bringing that clay around and pressing it down. And then I'm gonna flip it over, and I'm gonna do the same thing, working from the rim downward, okay. And I have another one I'm gonna put together here, just to show you guys how to stack form, just to kind of go over that. I won't be putting a bottom on this one. Okay, so again, I have my knife, put my thumb as as a stopper, cut an angle. Okay. Flip over and cut an angle. Okay. Scratch. The nice thing about a serrated rib is that if you have high spots, it'll kind of shave them off and remove any high spots, or it'll drop clay in low spots. So I'm gonna pick up my bowl, tack it, and again, when you tack it, you'll see those angles meet and you have a perfect consistent thickness. And then I'm going to tack it here, and then just fold that over. Okay. All right, so now I have two bowl shapes. Let's go ahead and do our cup. Always smooth. Now, you can also, let's say you're not very good at cutting angles. That happens, okay? You can actually use the plastic or the paper towel, I don't want to say smash, but to gently taper the end instead of cutting. Okay, so right now I have a paper towel over the end of my cup, and I just took my paper towel and I kind of smashed it, and it gave it an angle. You can see where it pulled up there, so I'm going to tap that back down. Now you have to flip it over, and you can maybe smush it. Maybe smushing is the technical term. So, and as I'm tapering it, after I smushed it, I'm smoothing, but smooth down, meet in the middle, and then push and smooth and meet back in the middle. So now I'm going to go ahead and score. Add some water. And we're just gonna tack it together. And you can see where it meets. I still have a consistent wall. It's a different look, but it still does about the same thing. Okay. So smushing or cutting, whichever one you choose. If you don't do that and you overlap them, if you don't cut or smush the ends, you're gonna have a really thick bulge where the two meet, and it makes the form break out of a circle and almost wants to triangle toward that really thick area. Okay. So, all right. Now, let's talk about putting bottoms on. So we need to have our banding wheel, and you also want to have a bat or maybe a piece of drywall board on top of your banding wheel, or it might stick and then you have to cut it off with a wire. So you don't want to do that. So let's go ahead and bring our piece over, our first piece, that was our bowl. And we just need to clean it up a little bit, okay? Just kind of make sure it's as round as you can make it. And then on the bottom, we're actually gonna flare it slightly, okay? So the pinching pull that I've been teaching you on the wheel, it didn't go away. You still need to use that. So I'm actually gonna pinch it and just flare this foot slightly. nice, it puts a curve into your work, and when you're hand building, sometimes the forms don't have a lot of curve to them. So we're gonna take this truncated form and put curves into it now. So I'm just pinching it, and remember, when you're working, spin your wheel, and if you pinch it here on this side, let's say this one spot, you need to pinch it all the way around. So make sure it's the same as when you're wheel throwing. Whatever you do on one layer, you let it go around one full rotation, giving it the same touch, the same application. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and score the top. One of the reasons I'm working with my clay at 1/4 of an inch, I like a little bit thicker pot, but I want to make sure that there's a nice landing for my bottom, okay? And if it's really super thin and you try to put the bottom on, it's not going to adhere very well, okay? So you need to have a substantial amount of clay there. I think 1/4 of an inch is perfect. And then we're gonna stretch the rest of the clay when I flip it over. You can smooth your circle by just rolling it, and also using your paper towel to go over those edges. Clean it up before you put it on. It's easier to do it now before you add it. And then I'm gonna just set it on there. And make sure you have it exactly where you want it. And then I'm just gonna gently tack it. I want you to make sure that you keep your pressure localized to where the foot meets the wall of the bowl. If not, you're gonna end up collapsing the inside of this foot. Now I'm just gonna use a pony roller to keep my pressure localized and just spin the banding wheel as I apply this. And I'm going to use my rubber rib to just smooth a little bit more. And I'm just using my fingers to go over this. Okay. Now, when I flip it over, I've got my double-ended rubber tip tool, and I'm just gonna go over on the inside, whoop, on the inside where the bottom meets the wall. I'm just gonna get my rubber tip tool in there and just lightly smooth that. I don't add a coil where the attachment is. My attachment's very clean and I don't need a coil there. And it's just extra clay that's making a thick spot that has a chance of cracking later. So, okay, now what we're gonna do is we're going to give this bowl some volume. So I'm gonna hold my left hand in a cup shape, and I'm just going to take my right hand and just press into this cup shape and kind of dig into it a little bit, flaring this bowl. Now remember, you have to go around one full rotation for each application that you're doing. Same as on the pottery wheel. So you might want to keep looking and decide if this shape is what you're looking for. You can keep flaring as long as your clay is thick enough. So as I am stretching the clay and getting volume, this seam is starting to kind of not open up to where it's a structural issue, but it is starting to kind of flare open. And don't worry about that, because we're gonna fix that, but don't touch it now, okay? You wanna wait until it's leather hard, and I'll show you on my other bowl that's been waiting to be finished. So I'm just pressing the clay into my left hand. You can think about whether or not you want to have a supported curve or a cupped curve, a freed curve, concave. So right now we have what looks to be a supported curve. If I want to make a cupped curve, I'm just going to pinch the clay at the top, moving inward. So I really have an angle going. So I can change the conversation, so to speak, of the pot just by changing the rim. Like, you have to decide what the termination point is going to be. Like, what do you want this bowl to do? Now, let's bring this form over. You can stack the circle-matic forms. I created a cupped shape, so let me pull this back out. So I could, if I wanted to, I could score the top of this, and I could score the top of this, and I could add the two forms, and I could create maybe a bottle just by stacking them, okay? So this is my cup and my bowl pattern. So this is a very, very good investment. And you might want to think about, if you're doing that, like when you're stacking, put your seams maybe all in the same place. And it's okay to let your seams show. That's a really great starting and stopping point for your decoration. You don't have to get rid of your seam, you can keep it. I haven't flared this cup yet, but once I flare the bottom of this cup, it'll be the perfect width to attach. Okay, you could do handles, you could do a spout and a handle. So that's a little introduction to the Circle-matic. Okay, but I would first practice with my bowls. Okay, so this bowl has to sit, and let's go ahead and finish our cup. So I'm gonna go ahead and, like I said, I'm gonna flare the bottom, give it a little bit of a curve. Kind of looks like a foot that you would trim. Oh, hi. George Pierce is watching. Hello, George. George is one of my graduates. He's graduating, and he just finished. And George is a hand builder, and he's a vet and served our country, and he makes really great trompe-l'oeil hand-built forms using the Circle-matic and some of his handmade patterns. So his work looks a lot like metal and tools and gadgets and things you'd find in a garage that strangely serve tea and coffee at the same time. I love it. Okay, so I flared that, and now I'm going to roll my bottom. Okay, and go ahead and smooth. Just to show you, once you flare, it really does fit the top of your bowl, or well, actually the bottom of your bowl. So, which this is a nice form by itself too. This could just have a couple of handles and be a great vase. Okay. So add your bottom, and then I'm just gonna tack it, and then get the pony roller and roll this on. Just smooth. Now, you don't have to bring your cup out, but let's go ahead and try that. So it might be hard for some of you who have like really long fingers, so I can get my fingers down in there, and you can get a throwing stick and use the throwing stick instead of your fingers if you need to do that. So that just changes the look of that. It breaks it away from that pattern that's so stale. Gives it a little more personality. And I'm just gonna pinch this mouth open just a smidge, not a lot. I don't want to get it, I don't want it to create a bell shape top, but okay. So there's our cup. Now let's bring over a bowl that I made earlier. And this one I did create a bell shape. And now this area here, when I pooched it, you can see that the seam started to open up. And so what you can do is take your serrated rib and just go over top of that seam. And remember, this moves high spots and it'll drop clay in low spots. So as I'm cleaning it up, it gets rid of that seam. And it did so without changing the form, okay? If you have a really, really high spot where your two walls met, I would consider shaving it down with maybe even a rasp. Okay. Now, you can also take your rubber tip tool and go over the bottom attachment. Or you can, if you like, you can shave this. Dave, is my tool behind you in that white plastic basket? Thank you. No. I hate when my sponge, oh, it's right here, my tea. Okay. Go ahead and flip it over. I'm just gripping the foot. If this was my foot, I'm just gripping it with my sponge and smoothing around. Okay, so this clay that we're using, I'm going to do the same on the rim. The clay that I'm using right now is brownstone, and this is one of the clays that we use here at Western Piedmont. It's a cone 6 stoneware, and it fires a really nice tan color. So this is one of our options, and it's really forgiving. I think all of our clays that we use here are pretty forgiving clays. Now, just a quick tip on making a handle for your cup, because we are running out of time. When you're making your cup, you can hand build a cup out of a slab. That's perfectly fine. You want to choose maybe a thicker slab, and you want to make sure that you smooth the edges the way I taught you with the rims of these. You want to smooth those edges with a paper towel or a piece of plastic, so that way it doesn't cut into your finger after it's glazed. Another thing you might not think about is how long the pattern that you create has to be. So what you can do is just take some clay and make just a really quick coil, and you can actually hold it up to your cup. Now we know that this is way too much clay, so you know that your pattern is not going to be this long. So let's go ahead and start cutting down. So we're getting closer, but I still think that comes off the cup a little too far. So maybe cut a little bit more. Okay, it's getting better. Now we have to start thinking about how this cup is going to sit onto our form. Okay, so you want to kind of get an idea before you sit down with paper and pen and decide like what your pattern is going to look like. I think it's really great just to make a simple just ribbon handle. And so what I like to do for hand builders, maybe if you don't want to pull a handle, is you can just take some clay and let's roll a coil. So I'm just gonna squeeze this clay into a coil shape. And now I'm just gonna roll with the palm of my hand, moving from the inside to the outside. And don't press super hard. It will go faster if you add slight pressure instead of trying to hurry and pushing really hard, because when you do that, it'll flatten out one side, okay? So just roll over the quill, just, you know, not in a hurry, and just go from middle to out with your pressure, and then just kind of come back into the middle and then pressure again. Okay, so now I can then take this and slap it. Reminds me of a noodle making class I took in China. So let's go ahead and slap this, and I have one side's flat and then the top is rounded, and I'm gonna smooth it with my sponge. Okay, and then I'm gonna cut off the ends that I don't need, and I'm going to give this an angle. So I always let it fall over my thumb and get that nice curve. So I'm just gonna add a little bit of water. And I just want to tack it on, make sure it stays, let it fall over my thumb. I don't like how high I put it, so I'm just gonna take it off, cut a new angle. I'm just gonna move it down, and that's okay. It's not wood. You can shave it off and put it back on. All right, so I'm actually gonna, yeah, right there, I think. Tack it on, fall over. I like how the cup handle doesn't go over my rim, especially if you like to put your cups upside down in your cabinet. You need to think about that. So this cup is still pretty soft because I just made it this morning. Make sure that I have my hand down in here as I'm pressing, so that will stick. So today we made a bowl and we made a hand-built cup. Thank you guys for joining me this summer. It's been a lot of fun, and look for posts. Hopefully we'll be able to do a tour of the studio sometime in August, and I hope everyone enjoys the rest of their summer. And if you want to come and take a class with me at Western Piedmont, just contact me and Dave will show you my information. And you guys have a great day. Bye.